well. And let's put that right there. And that one, it has like an auto level, so that should work. And I can see it, so that's nice. Usually I get really nervous about 30 minutes in. Is it going? And one time, one wasn't going, which really made me anxious. But that's why I have two.
So these are the questions?
Yeah, these are the questions. And it's pretty open-ended, and there's sort of a couple parts to it. The first part is a very sort of meant to be quickly going through your current practices for your digital files. It's a survey that I did that I've done online with a bunch of emerging writers, and that I'm asking all the participants in this as well. And then we'll talk kind of specifically about your writing processes for probably the majority. And then there's questions about computing and computers, and usually we cover those, but sometimes I go through those a little bit too if we've gone through things, and I want to ask a few more. Does that sound okay? Do you have to go somewhere or anything? Okay. But yeah, everyone has been hour and 15 to hour and 45 right in there. So if you would please state for the recording devices your name and our location.
Stephanie Strickland, New York City.
Okay. So in this section I ask what you write and what you use to write it, and this is about how you compose currently. So what genres do you write in?
I do books of poetry, and I write critical essays, and I write and I make usually collaboratively born digital works.
Okay. And would you say you have a primary genre?
Poetry.
What kind of devices do you own or have access to for your writing?
Pens, pencils.
Okay.
There's 4 computing devices in this one room.
Okay.
I keep an old XP machine going with difficulty these days. I liked Word 2003. I managed to get that and Word 2007 on that machine.
Oh, great.
And then I have a little small Acer, which is underneath there, which is actually probably the most advanced. I mean, but again, it's Word 2007 is on there that I write with, and it's for travel. And then since the last thing I made was a app for iPad, I was forced to buy an iPad to show the thing on.
Yeah.
So that's over there.
Okay.
A mini.
A mini? That's what I have on.
But I do not write on it.
You don't write on it, right?
No.
Okay. And so the operating systems you're using are mostly Windows.
XP and Windows 7.
Okay. Do you work on the different devices, and how do you work between, like, I guess if we have all these devices, what's your sort of style for going between them?
If I'm generating new material, I will certainly do a certain amount of writing by hand.
Mm-hmm.
I capture at various points the material in a word processing program. The one I work with most intuitively is Word 2003. I'm annoyed at all the extra ridiculous functionality. And
at least there's no Clippy, right?
Yeah, but I mean, there's too much. It's not directed, for what I want to do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't handle other things like Photoshop would that that it says that it will do. Whatever.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's not supported anymore, as with so much of the software that I once used.
Yeah.
So I capture it at different points. Certainly capturing it online is much better for sharing it.
Mm-hmm.
And editing it to a degree, but it's not particularly good for through line.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you're writing something long with a complex argument, I think it's much easier to have it in front of you in paper and read it out.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to go into a collage-y kind of style of stuff that's going to be published online.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder to get a really long consecutive argument made, I think.
Yeah.
Or thought. And it's not fluid enough to do poetry. I mean, it restricts you way too much in terms of formatting compared to what you can do on a page by hand.
Yeah.
in terms of how you want to scratch things out or put something right in. There's no arrow, insert, blah, blah, kind of.
Right.
None of that. So it's neither. So there's a loss from both perspectives, but obviously from the point of organizing it and sharing it, and necessarily sending it on for publishing these days and everything, it has to be done in that form. And long ago, I got used to doing it. Took me a long time to get there, though, because I started on a manual typewriter, and then getting an IBM typewriter was a big thing. And,
Yeah.
It's like I've used many writing technologies.
Yeah. No, I think that's really the impetus for this. Is just I was just thinking about the thing I did earlier, then I started thinking about the writers who like yourself who've been writing over this course. This is a very interesting time for writing technology.
I mean, the little balls on the IBM Selectric, that was like this huge thing, and that you could erase with an erase thing. I mean, that you didn't have to pull the page out and start all over again. On the other hand, there was a discipline about that. That was so each technology actually gave rise to a certain kind of poetry and a certain kind of mistake. I mean, there's characteristic mistakes people make in email or characteristic word substitutions that you do that you never did on the page. And anyway, so I don't think that story has really been told.
Yeah.
Because it shifts so rapidly, because you went from email to texting to this to that, and each one of those things has a different, and then Facebook sits up there and shifts its interface like monthly or whatever it does, So, and that gives rise to a whole new thing. And in the meantime, whatever a person might have wanted to do is kind of knocked out of their head, because they're left wrestling with interface.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, that's a good point. So in terms of like going between your paperwork and going to the digital, like what are those? What steps are there?
Every single project is completely different. Because I do a lot of, like, if I'm writing I'm doing a conference presentation. There was a couple of conferences we're going to do something with, so I would tend to generate something and send it to my partner. What do they want to say about it? And then we get together face to face and deal with it or whatever. Like the last really big new book I did, Dragon Logic, the way I wrote that was for probably 6 months. Every morning I had some paper notebooks and things. I was looking through old notes and things, and I would sit and I would write every morning for maybe 3 or 4 hours. And at the end of the morning I would go and type it up. Input it. I did not look at it again. The next day it would start completely fresh. And I did that to the point that I had no idea how it had begun, actually. And maybe 6 months later, I sort of came to the end of that. And then was a matter of looking back and like,
what do I have?
What is it? And so then there was a long period of making a unity of some kind out of it, and that shifted. That had made maybe 2 or 3 major shifts in understanding, as I go through it. But I really liked it because it was very new to me to go back and look at I really had no idea what it was. So there was a long period of writing, and sometimes I've gone to writing colonies and written straight through for a long time and not input it till I came back from there. But then there was a time when I still had a car at that time. I wasn't living in the city. And I put my IBM Selectric or whatever in and carry it up, and then every time, and then I would rent a computer to have at that place, because I wanted the printout. And I still want the printout. It looks different to me on paper than it does on the screen, and I want to know both those aspects. And then there came the time when no one did that anymore. You couldn't really rent a computer or there was the same time that you would go to make presentations wherever you went. The university had a computer there in a room with a stage, and and you needed a technician to come and fix up all the whatever. And then they didn't anymore, because everyone was expected to bring their laptop and to have one and travel with it. And I had a lot of problems with my hands from when I first started doing digital work. and I travel really, really light, so that made me really angry that I had to
carry.
Have to carry, and
Yeah.
I would borrow somebody's or something like that. So there's like all these phases of what you had to do or the way to do it, and so it was different for every book.
When you're working like for Dragon Logic, when you were working on paper in the mornings, what were you working on? Like what were your materials? Was it like that notebook and?
It was a bigger notebook than that, probably.
Okay.
A pen with wet ink.
Okay.
Wettish.
Yeah.
Not like ballpoint.
Yeah.
Good. That has a flow to it. Again, because of my hands, because it's to have the least effort of writing. I like engineering notebook with graph paper. Kind of things.
Yeah.
But like often I have bigger ones like this, and it was like a green graph on it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't like just lined pages. I don't like it. I mean, I like, this makes an overall page better.
Yeah.
But
It
still
gives more sort of volume to it. And that book has such interesting volume. So then how do you save that stuff? Do you just keep it in, once you're finished with the notebook, do you store it somewhere or you send it?
Put it in a box.
Put it in a box over there somewhere. But most of your pre-writing and your notes are all in notebooks like that? I mean, throughout?
You would hope, but no, they're not.
No.
There's a lot of newspaper, there's a lot of it can be anything because it's whatever I happen to pull up at that exact moment.
Right.
It can be stuff I wrote down at different times and how did I happen to bring it together, and then there were so many versions for a while. I mean, then you sort of drown in versions, and then I get tired of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then came the time when I decided I needed to use the back of everything. So,
okay,
for ecological reasons.
Okay.
And I really feel sorry for the people that do, because now there's this version of the thing, and you look on the back, and you have no idea when that thing on the back. I mean, if you think the front and back were done at the same time, they never were.
That's good. Now we have that on record.
But as they and they have no relation to each other, but I can just see somebody.
Yeah,
because
looking
they're
at
on the
them.
same paper, and they're saying that it will, and I'm like. And the other thing I do that's crazy is that I have some notebooks, and then sometimes I go through the exact same notebook again and write into it.
Oh.
So that it's actually a palimpsest of two different things that happen, and there's no way that you would know from the outside.
And so why do you do that?
Because I go back and see, is there still this, does it still have the pull for me that it did, the things that I wrote down at that time? Because there's things that tend to be continually magnetizing for me, And I like to see, like I've never kept a diary in the sense of a personal diary or like a diary of what happened with my kids' behavior, whatever. I've never done that kind of a thing. I have like a horror of that, like I have a horror of blind page. But I have, but there's just sometimes something just gets to me, and I just need to write it down. So it's like it's just these magnetizing things, sort of, right? So, or maybe some image or something that
came back.
Yeah, there's like I remember seeing once an image of a Viking boat that I actually did actually go get to see in Norway, but this was just on that cover of a thing, and it was the keel and the shape of the thing, and it was just in a kind of turquoise blue kind of thing, and it was like on the, like it could have been like a company's annual report or something was on the cover. It had nothing to do with what was in there, right? Yeah. But this image is just like, in a zillion ways, that was important to me, that I don't necessarily know how, So I have pictures pulled off like that, and no, it's not organized.
Okay. Good luck, future research.
Yeah, good luck.
So it sounds like you kind of write. So how do the, I mean, and Dragon Logic isn't really, I mean, it is in individual works, it is a collection, but it's also kind of, you know, and you know, some of your other books as well kind of, you know, are not quite like made of individual works, but then do you, when you're working then, when you move stuff over to the computer, do you save... What
do you mean not made of individual? I mean, there's individual poems, but
yeah,
they're related.
Right,
I mean,
right.
There's a whole meaning to the book.
Yeah, and it just sounds like with your notebooks, and I'm just interested in how then, like, how do you organize that once it moves on to a digital space?
No, I'm really good at that. I do that for lots of other people's books too. I see unities, I see structures. I think in structures. I wanted to be an architect at one time.
That makes sense.
And so, you know, the sort of math side of things and beautiful side of things and whatever, you know, I'm not different from me exactly. So that the structure is often what I see. You know, it's what it resonates. There's some kind of resonance here. So I see that, and then it becomes what's the best way in. Mm-hmm. But that's for print, because then in a digital work, there's not an in the same way, right?
Yeah.
In other words, there's an access often to all parts of it at once, and you know, in some kinds. And though I generally provide a default path through as well as a more open thing. So. And I think that's probably why that kind of work was so interesting to me, because especially, I think, starting with True North, which has those 5 intricately poems, the True North poems itself are sort of used to divide up the book. Yeah. But really, they're supposed to be at the center of, you know, a moving pole, like the sun going around, so that how do you tell where True North is? You're answering that one question. And then the rest of the things would be around it in a sort of spherical space. So it really should be an installation. Or true 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
You know, which of course you're not going to get. But anyway.
Someday there'll be holographs.
Yeah. Right.
So, and then just in terms of the nitty gritty though, I mean, like, when you have a file on the computer, what's it called? Like, is it called the title of the poem? Is it, or is it? Do you have large files full of many things?
I have. Well, at some point, it's the name of the poem, or it's a name that references the name of the poem. And for a long time, I will do revisions within that file with the date at the top.
Okay.
Of which revision that is. Though sometimes when I'm doing many revisions in one day, that gets a little lost. Then at the point of a manuscript, there's a whole file that's the entire manuscript. Okay. And those will have dates or some, you know, called 1, 2, 3 or something. I mean, they'd be distinguished in some way as to which version they are of the whole manuscript. I don't just put a whole lot of stuff together. I mean, it doesn't belong together in one file. I have kind of an elaborate folder system. Okay. Which, having worked in libraries, I'm pretty comfortable dealing with elaborate folder systems. You know. Yeah. And so I know where I think, but increasingly, it's like, where did I put that? Because there's too many places to put certain things, right? Is it the conference that I'm going to give? Is it under essays and talks? Is it under whatever? Yeah. Right? And the search capability within Windows is pathetic.
Yeah, it's terrible.
So, not better on Macs to my. Yeah. Though I'm not as well acquainted with them. So that's a little annoying. That I can't. Google. You know, I tried to find. You know the book called The Burnt Book. No. By Mark hyphen something, Uakint, or Uak. Anyway, I thought it was Kinnan. I had Ouak right. I had Mark right. I had Burn right. Right. And go on Amazon, go in books, say French, talk, Jewish, whatever. Yeah. Could not find it, right? Okay. I mean, seriously. And then I had, it didn't make what I thought was an obvious, do you know how they usually do it? Did you mean? You know?
Yeah, no,
it was like terrible. Anyway, I finally got it in Bing after trying a zillion different things. But I mean, like, it should be better by now. That kind of thing should be way better by now. Any published book should be.
Should
and the
just
Google
pop
Books,
right up.
give me a break.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm not happy with search.
Okay. In general. And as a librarian, I think I can understand your problems with that. So just to be clear, like when you're doing an individual poem and you put the date at the top, do you have like a version and then another version at another page with the new date or something like that?
Yeah, so the file could be 50 pages long.
But it's one poem.
But it's
with
one
lots
poem
of different
or whatever.
versions. Okay.
And then increasingly you're farther away from the one. And then you get to, I can't deal with this poem anymore. What's useful is often a version really near the beginning. Mm-hmm. And then you take something from the middle.
Yeah.
It's under the end of the file, and then you can find your way, kind of, because you forget what whatever. Yeah, I do it like that, or and then eventually it's like what you either call final version or the version sent to so and so, or the like that, to try and have a clean copy folder as well as the working.
So so you have the kind of the working draft, and then you can push it into a different folder that's more finalized.
Or like to send out or something like that.
Okay. And during this time, are you printing out those to revise them as well?
Well, you print them out. You don't print out everything. At a certain point, you'll print it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you save any of the paper copies of those printouts?
Yeah, but it's not big, right?
Yeah.
So I was very happy when Duke went to taste. Like, nah, back. But I mean, that's not easy either because of this thing of going back to the notebooks and things and what you do and don't want to send on.
Yeah.
I did send off things like the galleys and things of manuscripts and stuff like that, and sometimes it just seems crazy if there's just too many versions, and those all from before were all printed and all very fine paper for the back.
Yeah.
So I just turn them over and use them for.
There you go. Oh man, that's going to be fun. How did you develop your sort of writing style that sort of revision style on the computer? Did you start out on the computer doing it like that, or how has it grown into doing that?
I don't know. It was always like that. I was extremely aware. I'm very aware. Or with every shift in software, every shift in functionality, it just kind of hits me.
Yeah.
What I've lost and what I've gained, if anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always needed to see it both ways. So I think from the beginning I printed it out, and and then from the time I had trouble with my hands, which was 1995 when I first started using StorySpace in a beta version, that erased all your links every 11th save. What? That was the flaw. No, I didn't know. It was the first time I used software. I thought I must be doing something wrong.
Oh,
no. So it was just terrible. Anyway, so I couldn't keep doing it. I couldn't keep working.
Yeah.
And so there was a whole period of becoming sort of a little more ergonomically aware, working with computers, and they changed so much, and so, as many different ways as possible, you shift off to use different, your eyes get really tired of being on a computer, or your hand or whatever.
Right. And then currently, how are you backing up your work?
Well, I try to make that the main thing. And I back that up onto a flash drive.
Okay.
And then I have this sync toy stuff that Microsoft makes for its computers. So I have that on there, and so I sync that onto there. That works okay.
Yeah.
Then I have a little wallet backup drive that I try to put from there onto that. That doesn't work as it was working fine, and now they just updated, so I'm having trouble with that at the moment. But eventually, that sort of works. So it's on there and there, in there. And then the Acer, I just kind of put the files on that I made one big copy from there, but I don't really keep it updated and everything. Because it's just the files I really need to work with when I'm traveling,
Are there any sort of standard are you like backing up like every 5 months or something? Is there sort of regularity to it, or is it sort of...
I note on my overall to-do document when I last did it. I do it at least every 2 weeks, but if I did a lot of work, I would do it. If there's a whole lot of stuff that I wrote or something, or and it'll be, and if I'm doing that, it'll kind of be on little flash drives between the computers as I move, like to work on it here or whatever.
Do you ever email it to yourself or anything like that? And if you like maybe like a copy of the recent manuscript or anything?
No. I don't email it to myself.
Okay. So that was
there used to be a lot of other ways. Do you remember those iOmega thing? What was those drives? Do you remember those things?
Like the zip drives?
Yeah, it used to be zip drive. It used to be 1,000 ways.
Yeah. I went on this trip. I went and visited the Beinecke and met with their Born Digital archivist, and like they have a computer stack with all the different old things to slide in. They built it themselves. It's really kind of cool to see. Yeah. And all that forensic material to look at those things.
And all the it's just.
What about your older media?
I mostly just got rid of it. It just annoyed me. It was just so much to come between you and your work. Yeah. And then, when I first started working and collaborating with Margie Lucebrink, she was using Toolbook. People know about Toolbook. Right?
Yeah.
and inevitably, each new version of the software would be worse. Do you know? There was more functionality in the beginning, right? And then they would just knock it down. So then those of us who use Director and Flash, and that we've been hit hard. Yeah,
Flash especially. What's Director?
Director is Shockwave files.
Shockwave
files.
Okay.
And Director was beautiful. Director, the e-literature pieces that I liked the best were made in Director.
So is that sort of like your sort of ideal software environment?
Well, it was, it doesn't produce stuff for miniature mobile devices, right? Right? But yes, the work that I thought was really beautiful was done in that, and Macromedia was fine. Adobe, when Adobe bought Macromedia, it didn't. Between Adobe buying Macromedia and Steve Jobs, I understand Flash is a memory hog and all that when you move to but between those two things, those were very creative things, and they haven't been really replaced. The HTML5 and JavaScript doesn't do it, the same way, and people are trying to do it. So the thing is, they'll make an app. Well, it's so that that whole thing just annoys me, that it's such under the control of so few software. So few computer or software companies, right? What you can do and what's supposed to be done and the way things are supposed to look, and it was such an open, so much to explore, and so much did get explored and has disappeared, right? Because of the inability to access it, that we've lost like a generation of design intelligence, is what you might even say, right? Yeah. Because people were exploring that, and there wasn't enough time for other people to see it or think about it or whatever before the thing had shifted and moved on, right? Mm-hmm. So, that all made me very annoyed. Yeah. And it seemed to me that nobody cared about the exploratory side of it, which they should have. Google, Apple, they have enough money to care about the exploratory side of it.
I think so.
Microsoft too. Do you know? They should be running huge, like IBM did, or like Bell Labs did, huge exploratory, right? Yeah. Anyway.
So I guess a question from that, like, what made you stick with it?
Well, it's just the architectural. The possibilities are just so great with respect to time and performativity and reach, and it's an international art form. The last of which was maybe concrete poetry.
Yeah.
You know? And we need to communicate the world's problems are global.
Yeah.
I mean, whether climatologic or poverty or what have you, right?
Yeah.
Water, whatever, resources, survival. So we need to speak. You know, I can't speak to 500 people in English. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like I just think you should explore what you care about in a medium that does have a reach, and there's difficulties with that. I mean, this generator that Nick and I made, which was translated into Polish, and I never learned more about English or Polish or computation than trying to translate it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it brings up aspects of your language you never think about, because you never think about how it's different than Polish, for instance, right?
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they're trying to read your thing, and they're trying to read, in this case too, Melville and Dickinson, because the work Scenes Far Between was based on that.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
And then they're trying to deal with that, and there's not a good translation of Dickinson in Polish, and then what? So how do you that? You know, so it's a really intense. Not only is it international, but it's a very intense investigation and evaluation of your basic materials. You know, what you're working with too. So you get to know your own stuff better, and you get to know somebody else better. And I think that's a minimum of what we're going to need.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a really good point. So when did you do the translation into Polish?
Well, we didn't do that. These two
right.
Polish people did it. Well, last year. Well, it was done by last year, Paris in October, I guess, early October, whenever, September, October.
Mm-hmm.
The ELO meeting was in Paris, and it was presented there, and they gave a paper on it, and we gave a paper on it. Which will come out in this French journal Formule in June or whatever. And it had been, they started doing it pretty soon after it was published. I think they started working on it. I mean, Nick had run into one of these guys at, I think, a translation conference in Paris that Barry Weed had run or whatever, and so it had been in the works, but it just was a long email exchange. But this is the question, and how would you answer it, and how would you answer it, and all that. Did
they keep the JavaScript specifically, and then sort of substitute words within the eraser?
Well, no, they had to do. You have to modify the code
the whole thing because of the syntax.
Yes, you had to modify the code as well as the. That was what was so interesting, you know, because you think the code is, international, but it's not. It's not. It's very language specific. What you do and what you can do. So. Interesting.
Oh no, that's fascinating. So I'd like to talk kind of more like on a grander, or not grander, but a longer scale about your sort of career as a writer, and if you could kind of describe that arc, like when did you start kind of writing really seriously poetry, and then what was like the move like from your first books into writing in Born Digital Pieces and stuff like that? If you could just kind of give a kind of broad outline of that.
Well, I was raised. My father was an engineer. He had absolutely no use for words. This is what words were used by con men, lawyers, and advertising men. That's it. And whereas the real world, right, was reliable and whatever, and he could build anything or sail anything or fix anything or whatever. So it was like that. Mm-hmm. So I didn't, my grandmother was a great reader and so forth, you know, and so there was that kind of thing. But in my education, I didn't have any. I mean, I did a lot of literature, but there was no point in it that I had any creative writing, anything like that. So I got married when I was still in college, and I had 3 kids in 5 years, and putting my husband through graduate school, or all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And or helping to put him through graduate school. And so I didn't really start to write until I was home with no money, taking care of 3 children, kind of can't move.
Yeah.
Resources only the radio, really, kind of, And I started to write then, but I did not value it, really. And then at one point, I went home for Christmas, and my brother had brought a friend, and I remember I was sitting with this youngest child in my arms, and this and that, and talking late at night, only the lights of the Christmas tree are on. It just all of a sudden became clear to me that this friend of his wrote poems and was not tearing them up. It was like, it was like, oh,
you don't have to.
right?
Yeah.
So I then, by that time, I had my older children were in school in Yonkers, and and Sarah Lawrence had these writing programs, So I started to take programs there, and in exchange to pay for them, I worked in the library there.
Oh.
Which I didn't have any library training either, but that's all right.
Yeah.
And eventually they wanted me to get the library training, and I got the library training by offering Pratt students. Pratt had courses in Westchester and all around, right? And Sarah Lawrence had this computer. This was really early computer lab stuff, and I would teach the computer classes to the Pratt people who were up there to pay for the Pratt classes, right?
Okay.
And so I was asked to. They wanted to automate. The librarian wanted to automate the library. This is a tiny little library, but a beautiful library.
Yeah.
So no one knew what that was, right? I mean, they had OCLC, right? I mean, they had that, right?
Yeah.
But it was like, get a catalog, get the circulation system, which I'm not sure. Yes, they might have it. So I said, sure. Why not?
Oh, yeah, that sounds fun.
Seriously. And it was like, you're reading this stuff like...
and this is like early 80s? Or?
This is like, really early 80s.
Okay, wow.
And it was like, the Washington Library Authority System, or Hennepin headings, or what it was like, what's the right way to go? I mean, and you would do FTP downloads of ERIC databases, stuff like that. There was some digitized stuff,
right.
But it was really not,
Yeah, that's really early.
So anyway, that's how I sort of became aware of that kind of, of those kind of issues, It's, in the meantime, I'd gotten my MFA and all that, at Sarah Lawrence. And, but I really didn't send out I had these children I was raising and a full-time job and stuff like that, right?
Right.
And so I was writing, and and then I somehow became aware of probably through Poets and Writers, McDowell and Yaddo and stuff like that. And so sent stuff off of there. So that was like the first time I really had time to write at length, to do that.
Yeah.
So that was like amazing for me. That was very valuable for me.
Yeah.
And so I think it must have been early 90s that was the first book was published. I think, Bringing Body Back. And then some of the next few won some prizes and things like that,
Right.
And I won a CAPS, which CAPS was a New York State grant, the old name for a New York State thing. And I got this newsletter from them, and it had, and that's where I first found out about Society for Literature and Science, which is now Society for Literature, Science, and the Arts. And I thought, that sounds like something I'd be interested in. That was Kate Hales had sort of founded that.
Yeah.
And so I started to go to those conferences, those meetings. And it was there that there was this notice about the NEH seminars, which if you're not an academic, you don't hear about these things.
Yeah.
But I looked, and it turned out So Kate offered her first one of these in 1995.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about electronic literature, but it was like hypertext fiction or whatever. And I'm like, what? Why?
What?
Because that's all there was, kind of, at the
Yeah.
time, right? You know?
Yeah.
And I had gotten involved with founding the Hudson Valley Writers Center.
Okay.
Some friends of, people that I knew up at, and which was, a poetry thing, So anyway, I went and looked at the guidelines for this thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it turns out that you could apply as an independent scholar for any one of these things, right?
Yeah.
It's like one unemployed person, right?
Yeah.
And I saw my whole application was you can't seriously only be offering this to academics and fiction people. You
Right.
really need someone from poetry and someone from the public arts
Yeah.
side of things, right?
Yeah.
So
And
that's
her-
how I got into that thing.
Yeah.
And that was the introduction. We had 2 computers it was maybe 15 of us.
Yeah.
We had 1 Mac and 1 Windows computer for everybody to do all their work on. So we were working around the clock.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful course. I mean, we did moves. We did all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
No one even knows what those are anymore. But
Wait, what moves?
moves online, like. You build rooms and you enter it textually. It's all textually.
Oh, yeah,
all
okay,
those kind of things,
okay.
and those kind of games.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
everything was, of course, new.
Right.
We went and saw wonderful digital art, though. There was a lot of wonderful net art being made at the in Pasadena, the Art Center Design, place, And we went to SIGGRAPH, big, and SIGGRAPH was just mind blowing.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
Yeah.
And there was a few things on CDs, Uncle Buddy's Funhouse and some Judy Miller. There's a few, and the Eastgate hyperfiction things.
Okay.
And he just had he'd just done this beta story space for Windows,
Mm-hmm.
right, which we'd made available to Kate, right. And I had done my first thing was my project was supposed to be some bibliography or something, whatever. So I got that done in about 1 second, and then she said, "Well, why don't you?" So I had just written True North as a print thing. I mean, as a paper thing.
Yeah.
And I'd sent it, or I don't know who sent it. Somebody sent it to Mark Bernstein,
Mm-hmm.
who liked it. He himself, likes science and everything, right?
Yeah.
And so he was really into let's make a hypertext out of it, right?
Yeah.
So that's when I started working with this, which was just because it had this error, and I kept reporting errors. I didn't know if there were errors, or I didn't know how to use it, or what,
Yeah.
And then it turned out to be this really terrible thing, which you get nervous and you say more often, and then it's like awful.
And so every 11th time, just
that's
deleted
it turned
the
out
links.
to be the thing. Destroyed your links. Oh yeah. So anyway, but we finally got it done, and I sent it in, and that was great. He's going to publish it. Then he told me I had to make a version for Mac, which wouldn't have been. And the affordances of the Mac were completely different.
Yeah.
I mean, completely different. They were like 2 completely different things. So fortunately, Dina Larson, who had been working with him and Mac forever, she and I got together at Margie's house in California.
Mm-hmm.
So she showed me some of the stuff that you needed to do with that. But that was just traumatic, really.
Right.
It was a traumatic way to go. But meeting Margie Margie and I then did stuff, together. One of the things which doesn't work anymore, the only one of my things that really doesn't work anymore, unless you have Netscape or whatever, or something. It was a version of a poem that was in True North, the last poem in True North.
Mm-hmm.
But from then on, that was it, and I wanted to do digital work, and so from the time I did V-Wave Sun Losing Luna on, a digital component was part of the vision of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So, and Slipping Glimpse was just purely a digital thing, though it got included along with the very, very first piece I did was Ballad of Sand and Harry Soot. And that was right after True North, because we had this Cyber Mountain conference that Dina organized the next year. And I had that ready for that. I remember bringing it to that.
In what form did you bring it?
It was an HTML.
An HTML
web thing.
Yeah.
And
did you?
So everything else is except for the app. This most recent app, which I don't know if you have, but there's a Veniverse.
Yeah. I've been looking at it this week. It's great.
You can play. It's for the browser.
Yeah.
Not the same on all browsers, but pretty playable.
And the ballad was that one, but didn't you win a contest with that one in print first?
No. Oh, I did. That was the Boston Review. Yes, I had written that.
Yeah, because I read the Heather McHugh thing.
Yeah. I had sent that. As a thing.
Yeah.
And then it was. But when I wrote it, though I wrote it in print, it was written almost as a response to the whole experience of the NEH session.
Okay.
Because it was just a whole response to this Silicon world, carbon-based world. I mean, like how they were clashing with each other, or how not, or their attraction to each other, or whatever. So it was prompted by my reaction to what happened in a computer. I wrote it in print. Said it's the length it is because whatever font size or whatever I had, it had to be 10 pages for the Boston Review. 10 pages in some format, and so it was set out for that. But then it was a natural thing to do it because I wanted to have the images of, because there were so many things.
Yeah. So what other? What programming languages do you feel comfortable in?
Well, I don't feel comfortable in any. I mean, I feel. I collaborate with other people,
right?
And in a lot of different ways, and I've been through a lot of different things with them.
Yeah.
And my role is always to want something that supposedly can't be done, and then and that's why I like to work face to face, and I almost always have, right? With the person, because you need to just fool around with it, and these glitchy, funny things happen, and it's great. And if you have a good collaborator, then or a very simpatico collaborator, right? You're both sitting there agreeing that it's great or whatever, and I actually love that process. And I'm trying to think. In the cases of working with Margie and Cynthia, I was doing all of the linguistic stuff.
Okay.
And we were doing interface design together. I mean, basically that was it. How can we make this happen? This is the effect we want to have happen.
Yeah.
Whatever. Margie had, and before Photoshop, again, it was so easy. We used to have these. We used to get these applets from Italy. This designer in Italy. It was so easy to look at things and put things together. It was just, we had just a wonderful time.
Yeah.
She had been in this NEH seminar as well.
With you as well.
Yeah.
And who are you speaking about?
Her name is MD Coverley is what she writes under.
Okay.
Her name is Margie Loserbrink. She was president of the ELO for a while, and so she taught at Community College on Irvine, and lives in Newport Beach.
Oh, nice.
And so we used to go to SIGGRAPH together, and we did, we still go to all these conferences together.
Yeah.
And still are very, very close friends. And so, but we were discovering it together anyway. And so her toolbook thing was so great, and she was so great visually, and we just had different things to contribute to it, and different design. And if you look at stuff she wrote, her own stuff, it is a much different. You would never confuse it,
Right.
But it's like we each had an influence, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
So those were those things. And then with Cynthia, it was great because I went to IDP, and Noah Wardrop Fruin took me there. And I just said, was there any of the students there interested in poetry, doing writing a poem? And Cynthia was. She was very literate. She had an engineering degree from Columbia, in the country, Columbia.
Oh, okay.
And she's moved on to completely other things too. But we did these two. We did the Universe and we did the Slipping Glimpse. And so there was two people that wanted to, and it was really clear Cynthia was the person that, we were going to do this. So we had a lot of fun with the Universe. And Slipping Glimpse came because I went to a talk on Catherine Bateson, and Paul Ryan was there showing some of those videos.
Mm-hmm.
Not the ones we actually ended up using, but some that are sort of similar, water videos. And I went out, and he used the word Create, which I'd never heard. I went up to ask him about it. And I bought his Video Mind, Earth Mind thing.
Okay.
And I read through the book, and there is a diagram in it that's wrong. And it turns out that he and Cynthia are both teaching at the New School. And I approached him. I said, we can fix this up for you. We can make a little program that'll make this right.
Yeah.
and we'd love to use some of your. So it was great. I came to his house, and we looked at them. Then all the colored one, the ones that I've used.
Yeah.
So those are 10 of about 50 or so.
Okay.
And but a lot of things, like I had to become a lawyer and draw up a kind of contract for us to use it and stuff like that, and all
Oh yeah, that's an interesting.
And then at one point, he said yes, you could use them, and Cynthia needed them in a certain form, and he wasn't really processing them in this digital form. And there was this one guy working for him, who was, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy calls me up one night about 6:00 and says, "Which ones do you want?" On the phone, right?
Yeah.
And so, you look at those water things. It's not the one with the water. You can't say the one that's green. You can't say the one, so I've often said that was the most difficult linguistic job I ever had to do, was to describe, without any notes, without any, just from visual memory,
right,
10 of these things from 50 that look really similar.
Yeah, that's funny.
But then he loved it. He really loved that work, and they showed he died just recently in his memorial things. They showed those things, and he was a great guy, and so we both had that ecological book. And Cynthia's gone on to do a lot of work educating people around she's part of Occupy, and this education, for the 99% kind of thing, including she takes groups of students to South America and so on. So she does intend to, and then she also has a career as a photographer. So, people go off in these different directions, from these things. Yeah. And then the thing with Nick is that he had a sabbatical and he wanted to do a lot of collaborations, and he came to me. I'd never done a generator. Generator was so different from anything I'd ever done.
Right.
And I wasn't really sure that was such a good idea. But he persuaded me, and so there was a lot of. He would travel here, I would travel. That was the hardest. That wasn't like with Cynthia. She's in New York. I could just sit down. Margie, I would go visit her. and would just sit down and do it. Right. Nick was a little harder to get together and do it, but we did it, and then there was a lot of interest in that. And there's been a lot of. Critical work about it, and the people that wanted to translate it, and then we presented at the Emily Dickinson Society, wanted to do it, and then when we did it there, we did this subsequent little generator called Duels Duets about our collaboration, and then after that I worked with Ian, and then Ian's in New York too, so we work, we've done a couple. We've done one about libraries called House of Trust, which is going to be published in Volta in August.
Right, that's up though, right?
You can go to House of Trust and see it. Yeah. Have you seen it?
Yeah. It's I was looking at it this morning.
Yeah.
It's got the library.
It's all about libraries. Yes. It's all about libraries.
So in these processes when you're collaborating, do you have the kind of traditional divisions between your labor? Are you like pre-writing, generating like you do in a notebook, and then you move to like a place where you're kind of composing and then revising and then finishing? I mean, are there those stages, or is it different?
Well, in some cases the poem pre-existed, so we know what we were working with.
So you have
right?
the content.
Right? Yeah. Well, we have that content.
Yes.
But that content
is good distinction.
Is very small compared to how to design the interface, right?
Yeah.
So I usually have a vision, just like with the True North. It's a vision that's impossible, short of an installation.
Right.
So at one point when I was at Georgia Tech, the graduate student who was doing the Techno Poetry Festival with me, we really were going to do it. We looked into, we wanted to have the stars like sensors that come down and you move among them and it would release the text and it would be mirrored and we would be water on the floor or mylar on the floor. I mean, we thought about it, right?
Yeah.
When we get there. So I would have a vision about it, but there would be, it's a learning process, like with Nick. It's like, so I want this ocean. I want you to fall off the ocean. Okay, so what are we going to? Okay, so we can make a torus out of it or whatever. I mean, in other words, it's a negotiation to find out what you would do in the programming to have the effect of what you need to have.
Of what you're envisioning.
Yes, of what you're envisioning, right?
Yeah.
And then he's a poet himself.
Yeah.
And so and we both liked and by chance had access to the lexicon databases for both of those poets.
Okay.
So this is
a
post-digital humanities project,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we were looking through, well, what words are interesting, what are not, and and then this just generating the template phrases, Yeah. I mean, that was like, so we would talk about this and what do we want to put back and what order do we want the words to be, arranged, so alphabetic mostly, but fast fish, loose fish, because we want them close together or at the end, So it's this whole understanding of the way you're doing this, right? And then, of course, going on from that, the Cut to Fit the Tool Spun course, which was like a meta piece, right? I mean, so getting into all those questions was like a sort of a different thing, and then I wanted. I mean, he did it on Python. Nick works in Python first to kind of sketch it, and then it was put into the. He didn't want. Nick is, if you see his other generators, he's not into color. He's not into I had to fight to get the blue. Nick, that's too basic.
That's
so
good. That's a good way.
Throwing all these metaphor things on it. So I did all that stuff about the number of fish in the sea and all that. You know what I mean?
Okay.
To kind of get the blue thing, but I learned. I mean, you learn so much from. You learn about each program, but as well, it's different sensibilities that you bring.
Yeah.
So Nick's and I think couldn't be more different, and at the same time, we will always love exactly the same things. I mean, they're mathematical, they're poetic, they're structural, the same things will just, and we both agree that it is not trivial whether or not there's a hyphen between Moby and Dick, and what I mean? So this, you get far enough away, you say, oh my God, they're like identical, they're in this, but then when you're right there, it's very different.
Very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't know what that thing. It's much more opportunistic than what you're suggesting.
Okay.
It's like, what do we have access to? What can we do in the time we have? The time that we have to get together. How would this work? So like the whole that we both love Dickinson and Melville. Do you know what I mean? It was just started out a generator. What? Right?
Yeah.
And then the duels duets there was a conference, an ELO conference, and the name of the panel was duels duets or something, and it was people that had worked collaboratively, right? And so we had worked with, and it was like I was just aware of like all the things that were different, because with Cynthia and Marjorie, it was much more, we were all doing the same thing as we went along, right? And much more negotiation, because generators just, I don't think that way, right?
Yeah.
So it was about the negotiations and stuff like that, but then we had that thing, and so, I mean, we did that on the train and over lunch, just throwing in those things. And I wanted it really realistic. I wanted, some of the things that actually do happen, you run out of time and you just, that's the reality of these collaborations.
Yeah.
Is that, it's not like some 10-year project where, every detail. I might love that, but it's not a medium that
rewards it.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And so, and it's how much can you get done in the time, and like, you hope to God that you think of the right thing at the moment that the person is able to implement it, and that you haven't this whole other thing that's really important that didn't skip your mind or whatever, and talk to some other people were brought into those discussions too, like the young man who designed the cover for the Spring Gun edition and so on. You know, so different aspects of and since I don't love social media or mobile, whatever, I definitely need to hear from people who are using it about the way it needs to be used and want it to be and all of that.
Yeah. How did you develop your sort of sense of design, sense of what you could envision?
I don't know. From the time I was a kid, I wanted to be an architect.
You wanted sort of a structural.
I did, and I'm sure seeing my father build things and stuff all the time was like was just more. I don't know, and I don't know why that would particularly apply, but I've helped lots of people put manuscripts together. I mean, if I see a whole bunch of poems,
you can.
Some people do. Some people have a sense for that particular thing, and some other people have different. Their best thing is at the poem level or at some other level, critical level or whatever. You know, but the place that I seem to operate pretty well is that putting the structure together thing. What do you see at that level? I mean, what are you after? I don't know. It's just like I see. I hear something as well as see something. I mean, online it's often a visual thing. Okay. But in manuscript, it's like there's this leading tone, like how are we going to get in, and what's going to lead to this, and what, and how. And do not bore me by putting this next to this, because I don't, you know what I mean? That there's like, it's not an arc. Okay. I mean, it's not like a theatrical. You're not thinking of like a dramatic arc or anything like that? No, not really, because that's not often what's the best. What is this? Well, and I've done a lot of editing. I mean, as editor at Slavering Hall Press and everything. What is this manuscript really about? What does it really do better than anything else? I mean, when, at the heart of it. And that has to come out. And so how do you introduce the person to that? The reader. And then how do you complicate it in an interesting way? Do you know what I mean? And how do you pace it so that the person, it's like a reading pace, right? Right, right. And will there be any use to divisions? Will there be use to the naming of divisions? Is that what, is it better to suppress that? Or is it, I don't know. It's just something about the individuality of the work that will suggest, or will suggest this is great, but this thing just doesn't go there. And I always ask people to send me, like all their outtakes too, because often those do go there. Right. Do you know what I mean? Right. And sometimes they took them out because it was too close to the bone, or they didn't quite, whatever. Yeah. Stuff like that. When you're working on, let's say your own poem, like an individual poem, I mean, what are you revising towards a sound in that way too? Do you hear a tone? Well, I don't know if I revise toward a sound, but I certainly read it out loud. I mean, it's certainly not just a visual thing, and it's not, and it may be conceptual, but it's not conceptual without reference to the other sensory modalities. So, for sure, it has to read right. Yeah. In my mouth. In your mouth. And has that been like the case ever since you started? I think so. Yeah. I think so. I was trained on nursery rhymes. Yeah, right. So it's always in the sort of oral experience. I think so. And well, then something like the red version, which is Indexical, right? And I mean, like, how did you? If it's index, I mean, like, what? How is that? Is that how did you put your stamp on that? Or it's like the. When I was first reading Simone Weil, I was very upset about the way people responded to her. Yeah. Because either they couldn't stand her religious side or they couldn't stand her political side, and they would name the other one as whatever. No one would see her as like one person. That one person could have these sides, and she could come from that. And so, and I read the Visions of Simone Michard-Brecht's play,
Mm-hmm.
I think, is the best work that's been done about her as a fictional work. There were some other plays and things about her and stuff that I thought were unbearably reductionistic.
Yeah.
So I did not want that, and so from that point of view, I wanted a lot of materials. I wanted, some documentary materials. I wanted to cover certain things. I wanted to use her language. And pretty much stuff was named the way it was. But then from that point of view of how you're going to put them together,
Mm-hmm.
it was exactly the fact that there was so many people who had so many different takes on it,
Yeah.
So it's almost indexical. Because, and this was a consideration, wherever you started, I wanted you to be able to start anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And the poems are written that way so that like if her brother is named, I mean, it's not, no matter where you start, you'll know it's her brother in some way. I mean, things aren't dropped in. You can make sense of it. It's written so you can make sense of it wherever you start. You'll have a different impression depending on where you start.
Yeah.
And that was part of the point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Though I think most people will read it straight through,
Yeah.
But part of the point was like, it's just impossible the number, and again, this is seeing things in the round, sort of,
Yeah.
that you read and you read and you read, or you have people who are supposedly sympathetic, like Robert Coles, which in his own way was just most reductive of all,
right.
And it's like, and then it was interesting to me that the Italian woman her biography was so much less reductive, the Italian woman psychiatrist than Coles, and stuff like that. And so it's like, how is it the way a woman reads it? Is it the way, if you're coming from the political side, if you're coming from the religious side? All these people have too many irons in the fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to, tell it the way I read it from the documents. I tried to keep it accurate as far as I was able to. I mean, it makes stuff up.
Yeah.
And in fact, after I'd done it in the year and a half, whatever, putting it together, and I stopped reading about her, and I'm like, somebody's going to publish some book that completely overturns this whole thing. They'll find out that whatever, this and that, right? And that didn't happen, actually, but I did have that worry for a while, then go on and read all these other books, and I didn't feel it was bad. But what I also realized is, like, I could get at a lot of things, but I couldn't really get at her thinking. So that you have more of that in Losing Luna. You have more of that. You have that stuff where you try to talk about some of her thinkings and a long line of people trying to think in odd ways.
Yeah.
So that was return to that. But yeah, that indexical thing there, in that sense that the book had come out of
reactions against
to this polarized assessment of her.
Right. If you had at that time already taken the class with Catherine Hales, do you think you would have tried to represent that in a digital fashion?
Oh, possibly. Yeah, possibly. I do. There's one little essay called 7 League Boots, where I talk, which is a hypertext essay long, long ago, and she's in there. She's quoted in there in a way. Possibly, yeah.
And had she just been an interest of yours for most of your adult life?
It's very funny because I was in I lost the name. There was this bookstore in Midtown, wonderful bookstore in Midtown, now gone. And I was in the philosophy section or something, looking at it. All brown and gray books.
That's
one
funny.
Pink book. So I took this one pink book, which turned out to be a biography of her, and that's how I got started. And then it turned out that at Sarah Lawrence we had most of her work because there was a man there who was teaching her. I didn't know it at the time. I hadn't heard of her. I just loved the way she wrote. She was a woman who knew her own mind.
Yeah.
She wrote with an authority, and I was really tired of. Well, I mean, there would be these things. Oh, yeah, for a woman, she's sort of a good philosopher. I mean, this was the whole tenor of the 70s and 80s. You could not. Women's minds were not well respected, and I loved the way she wrote, you know. I had a lot of trouble. I mean, she let the software pass through all these things. She was doing this political stuff, the factory work and all that. All of a sudden, at the end of her life in her notebooks, which I think is totally unfair. You know, I mean, we judge her on the basis of her student notes and notebooks that were never published and notebooks that didn't include all the mathematics and stuff she put in there. And so, but, you know, when she started going into folklore and stuff like that, I'm like, whoa, you know, the bridge too far, right? But then, you know, then I eventually caught up with her. But no, just riveting. I mean, the way she writes is just riveting to me.
Yeah.
And I was just angry that people couldn't see. I just thought the points of view that were brought to criticize her were just not adequate to what she was. And so that just kind of made me mad, you know. So,
is anger one of the common emotions from which you write? No.
It's like anger with love, right?
I
just loved it so much. I mean, I really admired it so much, you know. Then it just didn't seem fair, and it just didn't seem, just hadn't been. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, though a lot of people have told me that that's helped them write biographical or life or memoir things, you know, as a way to do that. You know, that they sort of, you know, that sort of.
I was struck by how contemporary it seemed when when in preparing for this, just reading it and thinking about all the, like, in the last decade, all the kind of, you know, focused thematic books.
Yeah, on people's lives. And
and documentary and the poetry of witness and all that. And I was just like, this is 1993.
Yeah.
And this is really what, you know, that's good.
Yeah.
As I expected, you've totally blown up all my questions, but it's good. It's good. But I do want to get a little bit more at the revision and sort of kind of like and the pre-writing and revision process for you of your non.
I would never do anything I would call pre-writing.
Okay, well that's.
I don't even know what that is.
I guess in, like, the compositional mode, like, so when you sit down with your notebooks, I would consider that sort of.
Yeah. So it's there's not one. There's three.
Okay.
Let's like there might be a date, but this might say 14 May 2013, and the next date in it might be 20 May 2014. So it might be a year later, right?
Right.
And it's like, in the meantime, I went to these conferences and took notes, and they're like kind of lying around here. And do I have a chance to get back and look at them? No, because I started to read Maya Sue, and I just wrote a paper about Simone Weil and Maya Sue. Right?
Okay.
Which is good. But why is that? Somebody writes something or something, you know, or gets solicited to do something or whatever.
Yeah.
This was religion and literature, or like through Fannie Howe or something. Fannie Howe and I would go to the Simone Weil Society, right?
Okay.
You know? And then, but Romana Huck is at Notre Dame, and I published at Notre Dame. And so I wind up at talking to Steve Tulsa, something, whatever, right?
Right.
You know? And I don't even know how I got on Maya Sue. I really don't. I guess I can't remember, but I was talking to a lot of people about Maya Sue, and then he writes the number in the siren, which is like, oh my God, this is a book. Do you know this book?
No, I don't.
It's about Mallarmé's Coup d'Idée.
Okay.
And it's the best book of literary criticism I ever read in my whole life. It's
wow.
so amazing. So, like, I'm reading this, you know, and then I realize, like, oh my God, you know, all of his philosophy comes out of the way he's talking about this poem.
Yeah.
So it's like the poem, it's Mallarmé is driving Maya Sue, right? And in case of Simone Weil, the Iliad, really, you know, was, you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Do you know what I mean? Everybody does it the other way, but, you know.
Yeah.
So then it takes me, and I do that, or I do some other part, and then I still haven't gone back over the notes.
Right.
From the conference from 4 years ago or whatever,
yeah.
Right? But there's kind of a set of things, which is where I'm about to start to write, you know. There's a kind of notebooks like that, and there's sort of notebooks that are kind of mathy or whatever kind of thing, and there might be some that are like semi-philosophical, literary, blah, blah. I mean, they're just different things, and they won't, and there's no real control over them. So at any given moment, there's a list of things to do and things that I write at the back of it or whatever, you know. Yeah. And they have to be small enough so I could carry around and ride on the bus or wherever I happen to be, or if I'm at NYU or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm part of this program that I get access to the Columbia and NYU libraries, which is great, right?
Yeah.
But through the New York Public Library.
Yeah.
So, it's very opportunistic.
Okay.
Where things are. I mean, it's like there's a conference and somebody says, do you want to be on the panel about something?
Yeah.
Or do you want to, or let's make this work, or we get all of a sudden, whatever. And a third of those things never happen.
Right. I guess I'm wondering then how all this not controlled work and note taking and everything then becomes a poem or poetry.
Well, it does. After a while, it just comes to a head or something. Do you know what I mean? So it's like obviously in the case of where there's somebody says be on a panel or be a paper or we need to do this or whatever. There's or you do something, you make an app, and then you talk about what is it to translate from one form of software to another or something.
Yeah.
That all sort of kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Or
you do this thing like See Inspire, and then somebody wants something for a special issue of Digital Humanities Quarterly, and you say, okay, we're gonna make a paper that's running code.
Right.
Because that's what people don't do. They don't look at the code, and we want, they talk about this and that, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, but those things take time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So you're off doing that, and so you get a little bit deflected from where you were with here, right?
Uh-huh.
And then somebody does whatever. So it's not completely uncontrolled. It's a little...
Yeah, not controlled.
It's like, but you see, there's suitcases. There are. Like, you can come up. Oh,
sure.
Thank you.
No, I'll just bring this thing.
See these suitcases or whatever.
Oh.
So this is like a Mayasu suitcase. Then there's a Karen Barad thing. So there's a lot of stuff going on now in my mind around Karen Barad.
Okay.
And so that's kind of this thing here.
Yeah.
And then these are 3 talks that I have to be writing on, whatever, including
the
archive. There's a talk at the Beinecke and the archive. This is for a Slovakian magazine. Oh, that's the archive. Oh, yeah, I have to be on some kind of feminist cyber panel or whatever.
Okay.
Kind of thing. This is the paper I have to give in June, which I'm waiting for Ian to come and finish. So it's...
So
those are all the readings, so mostly since the 2 books came out this year, I did a lot of readings.
Right.
So that,
right.
And that's it. When you're doing a lot of readings, you're writing the things for the readings. It's good for the readings and stuff like that. Right?
Yeah.
So it's not. But see, these notes are still here from when ELC 2 came out. And we were talking about that, which I haven't cleared that out or anything, right?
Yeah.
It's not. It's between controlled and uncontrolled.
Right. Okay. But do you ever? I mean, I guess are there ever times when you all of a sudden you're like, I need to write this book now. I need to put this.
Yeah, and the trouble with that is I had 4 grandchildren in the last 10 years. And do a lot of babysitting in the preschool years. So my son was teaching at Columbia.
Oh, nice.
When they were little. So I was going there, both parents working, right? Now he's at Duke, but now my other son has little boys who are almost 3 and 5.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of, and my daughter has been ill for 25 years, and her care takes a lot of time. So there's I'm telling you about this. So there's things that just, and it used to be that the colonies were the answer to that.
Okay.
To apply and go there. Now, since I don't have a car, everything you have to carry, and now it's kind of, I have to bring all these little piles I just showed you. Right?
Like a traveling pile.
Right? It's just really not, that doesn't work so well anymore.
Yeah.
And yet, if I'm right here, then everything is, on call kind of in a lot of ways.
Sure.
So that just gets harder, right? But definitely that, that happens, and trying to work out how to get the time to do that becomes an issue. And what can I say?
Do you have any new book projects? I mean, that are closer?
One thing is I have new poems. I don't necessarily know that they're a book thing. I've thought about doing a new and selected kind of thing, which I haven't done, right?
I was thinking about that on the walk over here, like
Yeah.
what like a selected for you would look like. It would be really
because it's
fascinating.
so weird, right?
Yeah.
Because they're so different. Right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
I mean,
they really are.
it really is. It's a whole.
It's very different. So, but whether or not that's a good idea, I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to know where's the best place to put your time. I mean, also I'm on the board of the ELO, and that doing
That's a lot of time.
A lot of stuff is going on with that. Actually, it's
Yeah.
a lot of work. We're really expanding in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's just, I don't know. It's very, you know,
No.
yes, love. You know, I'd love a whole. You know, if the day were twice as long.
I mean, then that day would be.
But, or you could just have a place to go, you know. But as again, the place to go is take, you know, in a way, I guess it's good to go and take nothing with you. But actually, I really want to be in touch with these things. I do work off
Yeah, absolutely.
things, you know.
Yeah.
And I do like the collaborative process. I think everything has to become more collaborative, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's the stuff I'm most interested in. Do you know, to have other, you know, how can we make our, not meld our minds, but, you know, have different streams of expertise and interest and flow. We have to learn to talk better to each other, I think, you know.
Yeah.
To solve something. And then I because I do have these grandchildren, you know, and so, you know, it's like, what is the most important thing? And born quite late to my children, right?
Okay.
You know, so
Yeah.
I won't see them for such a long time, right? More. So, what's the most important thing for me to be doing?
Yeah.
With them.
Yeah.
And all, you know, it's just like it's a question.
And then I guess so. Then, were there times in your life where you weren't so busy that you would?
No. My mother had cancer. My mother had lung cancer and was ill for 20 years. And for each of those years, we were told she had a year left to live.
Wow.
And my best friend was had terminal cancer for the last 2.5 years. And for the last year and a half of that, she's in hospice. And I was going out every month to spend a week with her because it was a hospice in her home.
Right.
You know? So it's been a lot of long-term care things that I've actually been involved with.
Yeah.
And doing a lot of things at the same time. But those times, like the Yaddo, McDowell, Gerasi, Ragdale, those were really, really wonderful times. I really have to keep that memory of an island of time. And so how do you find it and how do you make it for yourself and all that?
Right, right. And I mean, this may be a bad question, but has the caretaking entered into your? I mean, have you started to think about that?
I mean, there's one specific poem it was in the Best American Poetry this year. Which Introductions, which mentions in one of its stanzas.
Okay.
My daughter, I kind of and give the body back. There's some mother-daughter and poems. My mother, but I kind of it feels exploitive when you're so up close to people who are really ill and you're dealing with it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a demand to be present to them when you are in contact with them, that the writing demand is for a distance. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And I don't find those compatible. But I'm certain that underneath almost everything I care about in the way I think about it is this understanding that there needs to be space for these people who don't have the same chances and don't, and this is all well and good, but have you thought, this kind of thing, right? And I think that's another reason that Simone Weil's thought, appeals to me also. I mean, because she was always understanding that.
Yeah.
Where people were reading.
Right. No, I think I could see that relationship pretty strongly. In terms of your correspondence and your email and stuff,
Did you start out writing kind of regular letters with your work and sending stuff back and forth, and then move to kind of considering it via email? I know this is a abrupt shift, but
You mean when you're sending poems out?
yeah. Well, I mean, like in your revision process, do you have trusted readers? Do you have people that are helping you?
Long ago, in the doing the MFA program and stuff like that, there were some groups of people who were like, we'd known each other. There was a little bit of that. Not so much. I have one very dear friend, Nancy Knutson, who had been in the program with me. She also wrote fiction. And for a long time, every Sunday morning, she moved to New Mexico. We'd call each other up and talk about poems back and forth. And Rachel Loden is another person that at times we've exchanged work. She's doing different kind of work now.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. Sometimes I send stuff to Denise Newhamel, who's also a dear friend. But mostly after it's almost sort of
very close.
Done. Yeah, you know.
Okay.
So I have, and then I have a friend in Ireland. I have friends that I correspond with, but not in the sense of sending poems, which used to be in paper letters, and now has been supplanted by email.
Yeah, and has that changed has that made any difference to you?
It hasn't made a difference in the friendships.
Right.
The thing about the poems is that you see, some people give the body back in the Red Virgin and so on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they're just not going to get parts of Dragon Logic, and they're just not. And there's an even stronger divide amongst people who they just don't get, and they don't want to get electronic or born digital literature.
Right.
And I'm pretty much really deeply in both worlds, and they just don't get it. I mean, they don't get each other, and it's very hard with the e-literature because it changes so much that unless you're deeply in it, it's hard to learn it. You know what I mean? You have to really. It takes a lot. It's a evolving thing. So if you're not already in the middle of a net kind of life, you know, whatever. Which the younger you are, right?
Right.
So it's like I talk to lots of young.
Yeah, it's great.
But my old, you know what I mean? And so it's like this sharp division, right? So it's like it's not like you can really ask. So if both these things are in your mind, there's not like so many people you can go to because they're not going to get half of it one way or another, right?
Yeah.
Though I think that the younger people do get it much more. I mean, I feel like they and I are living in the same world more. Although I do not have a cell phone, and I must be the only person that anybody knows, or very close to the only person anybody knows who doesn't have a cell phone, and I get a lot of flack for it, you know. But I just there's some things I just take a stand against. I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
The social media thing, and I understand that there's some uses for it, but insofar as these people, insofar as parents holding their children's hands or pushing a carriage are not responding to that child's face.
I know.
That bothers me. So I think that the way that a face-to-face is cut off by the use of social media. I mean, two people go to a restaurant and look at their phones. You know, I mean, like. I know. That seems really lost to me.
Yeah. It's very pronounced in New York City. I mean, I've been noticing it. I mean, I've only been here a day, and I've been noticing it way more than I do out west. But I don't know what. I mean, also I see a lot less people.
Yeah. Right.
So, well, I just have a few more kind of questions, I guess, and these are kind of about like not feeling, I guess, but do you have in terms of like the media and the files that you've saved and created over the years, do you have sort of dear feelings towards those? Do you have like, or do you, I mean, like, what is the work, I guess is the question. I mean, like, where is it, and what do you feel like protective of, or do you feel protective of anything?
Well, you're glad for books. books are going to last longer than almost anything else
Yeah.
in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
I love books. I do love books.
Yeah.
I really strongly feel the limitations as far as being a creative writer,
Mm-hmm.
because I do have kind of a three-dimensional vision or hope or wish, and I see it in digital art, and I see it in lots of projects,
Yeah.
and they could easily be literary to me, and they're not.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But I would never not want books. You couldn't see that.
Yeah.
Where the minute you start to do digital work, there's a certain way, in the same way that if you're a theater person, that you have to let something go, even more than you let a manuscript go.
Mm.
Today's performance was today's performance, and that won't come back. Even
Yeah.
if you videotaped it, it really doesn't come back.
Yeah.
Right? That's what, plus
Yeah.
videotape doesn't. So there's something like that when you realize, and then you realize that, in fact, no one may ever read it the way you meant it to be read. Because, at least for my generation, everybody made their own interface. There was no time to get canonical interfaces for various kinds of work, or genres didn't precipitate out, not enough time for all that.
Yeah.
And so there's a certain loss there, right? I have no idea. What I think that the best way, probably at the moment, to save digital stuff is to have some video or something of somebody using it, plus people's notes, interview them about what they intended or whatever. Save the code if you can.
Yeah.
And on an emulation migration, all of it is so burdensome.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I do send some email. There's a few folders that I've designated to go to Duke. I definitely don't want all my email to go to Duke, right?
Right.
I mean, it's like,
Right.
But it's very, because you don't even, I also purge my email, I know it's not that does any good, but, I don't save,
Yeah, it saves the whole
but, it's like, so I try to just keep only working stuff, and if it's done, it's gone. Now, I pay a price for that sometimes, because I might want to go back and look at it,
Yeah.
But on balance, like, file maintenance is huge.
Mm.
And I want to be able to find what I need. Well, you see, I do a lot of different things. And so to find what I need is already a problem.
Right.
So I don't want tons and tons and tons of stuff around. And I'm not like those, like I document every day of their life and their dry cleaning ticket and all that. And I'm like, Christ, So I don't want that. I would hope that there's some place or memory or some collection, some server somewhere, that some of this stuff can be seen and saved in some form. So, this whole idea, that we sign up kind of erase history altogether, and like, what is history? And, we're just nothing but a moving front, I think that's a huge loss.
Yeah.
So, and I think I'm not invested in people saving every revision. I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases it might be interesting to see some of the things, but basically, the books are,
the books are
the books and the notebooks between them, I think, would be more interesting than seeing every page of every. I think that seems very fetishistic to me in a weird way. I could have gone another whatever, but it didn't. So. And I'm not saying the right thing turned out or anything. As I think I've said opportunistic to you a lot, but it's. I think you can way overdo it, and on the other hand, I'm not like, whatever. I am invested to a degree. I don't think you would ever work in a library and
not
feel like that way. And especially these things that got saved that nobody wanted at the time, and later you were so glad to find out that somebody saved. I really appreciate that about libraries too. Yeah. And so people who want to do that kind of work, I really I honor that.
So, I guess last question, but when you send stuff to Duke, like when you're sending digital stuff, how does that work?
Well, there's a digital librarian, or there's a guy.
There's a guy.
And they both changed. Unfortunately, Will is just leaving to go to the Newberry. So the two guys I worked with so far, the digital one left, and now Will is left. He's the other one. But presumably they're replaced, right?
Yeah.
So once a year, I tell them which email files, right? And they go through and do the email files.
Okay.
And then they have my. They have the stuff online. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. So they've archived
access
that
it.
themselves.
Yeah, they archive that
Yeah.
themselves.
Okay.
And then I don't do when I put a lot of stuff in a box. I sort of try to include a paper that says very roughly what's in here.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't to really go through and like catalog myself or something. You know,
Yeah.
it's like it's that or see my grandchildren or do my work.
No, that'd be
and of the three, it's like no.
Somebody else will do that.
It's like I try to give a little bit of an indication, but it's not wonderful. But anyway, and I haven't sent it off for a while. I was good for a while, and I sent a lot of stuff out, but getting the 2 books out and the things out, you get a little low from that to then send the stuff off.
Sure.
And I mean, the online stuff is really accessible in a lot of ways, actually.
Yeah.
You know, and in my website, which has kind of stayed up in its form.
Yeah.
For a really long time. Again, I think the design was good.
It is. No, that's an amazing part of it.
2002, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
yeah.
So I think it's held up, and I think you can get at quite a lot of stuff through it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
none of the Facebook type stuff like. This
Oh.
is my dog, or this is my lunch, or whatever.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but I don't, the stuff about the work. I think.
Yeah, and that's the important stuff. So, well, thanks a lot.
Okay, well,
I think we've got a good.
This is what we call a technical interview.
That was a technical interview. Welcome to the technical interview.
That's it.
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 The technical interview.
That's it.